So very good morning to all present here, and I welcome you on behalf of Oro University in this Oro Distinguished Webinar Series under the theme Cognitive Neuroscience of Emotional Branding and Subliminal Messaging. And I'm so proud and glad to share with you that today we have one of the eminent scientists, distinguished visiting professor from IIT Kharagpur, and also the former Director General of DRDO in the panel. Along with him, we have our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajan Velukar, and Dean Academic, Oro University, Dr. Rohit Singh. So on my behalf and on behalf of my School of Business team, I welcome you all to this distinguished webinar lecture series. A brief about Oro University. Oro University is established under Gujarat State Private Universities Act 2009 and under 2F Section and 22C of UGC Act 1956 and Regulation 2003. It is founded by Rama family, and the university is inspired by the vision and teachings of Shri Aurobindo and Divine Mother, and university offers various programs and skill sets in the areas of various domains of knowledge like business management, hospitality, IT, law, design, fashion technology, journalism and mass communication, human sciences, and liberal arts. Along with this, from this academic year, we are also opening up for School of Sciences. Along with the rest knowledge domains, university has a unique establishment of Shri Aurobindo Integral Learning Center, which is aligned to the spiritual research and the growth and development of the brain in physical, mental, vital, and spiritual domains of life. The university aims to achieve its vision by embarking students on the journey of realizing the infinite potential among them, and also has its international presence in the form of several academic collaborations with leading foreign universities and state universities in India and abroad. Oro University is a space of meaningful knowledge transactions. With this introduction, I pass on the session to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajan Velukar, sir, for his opening remarks on this occasion. So it's over to you, sir, for your opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. The Honorable Dr. Manas Mandal, the ex-director of DRDO and a professor in IIT, who has spent time in BHU, IITs, DRDO, and now again in IIT. I am really happy to welcome you, sir, for this session. And as others are keen to listen to you, I too is keen to listen to you, because this is a subject I always wondered that I should have learned in my college days. However, I could not when I read a book on brain, and now another book which I am reading called, the name of the book is Behave. So it's very interesting. I'm trying to understand from a layman's language, and therefore I was very keen to listen to you, and therefore I have joined this session. I am sure everyone will enjoy your lecture. They may have some questions. I'll just read a paragraph from one book, and then I will hand it over to Monica again, and then for the further proceedings. Now, the question which everyone is asking today about reimagining life after post-COVID. Now, what will be the life? How we will live, and what is going to happen? Why do human beings behave as they do is a question which this COVID-19 and some other pandemics like this is asking. So he says, the author, we are capable of savage acts of violence, but also spectacular feats of kindness. So at one end, we are doing violence. At another end, we are showing kindness. So is one side of our nature destined to win out over the other? Every act of human behavior has multiple layers of causation, spiraling back seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years, even centuries, right back to the dawn of time and the origins of our species. In the epic sweep of history, how does our biology affect the arc of war and peace, justice and persecution. How have our brains evolved alongside our cultures? We need to understand our brain, and therefore I think today's lecture will be a feast to all of us. So thank you once again, sir, for giving us an opportunity to listen to you. Thank you, and welcome again to Oro University, which is founded on a very, very different path. We are talking about integral education. We are not just talking about giving knowledge to the young people and giving them jobs. It is much, much beyond. We are trying to make them a good citizens, and that is what the Oro University would like to. How to become is the fundamental goal of this course. Over to Monica.
Thank you, sir, for your opening remarks. Now it is indeed my great honor to introduce my mentor, Dr. Manas K. Mandal, to all the participants present here. Dr. Manas K. Mandal is currently serving as Distinguished Visiting Professor at IIT Kharagpur and also Adjunct Professor at National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. Sir has served as a distinguished scientist and a former Director General of Life Sciences, DRDO. He was the Director, Defense Institute of Psychological Research for about 9 years. Dr. Mandal holds a PhD from Calcutta University and started his career as a lecturer at Banaras Hindu University. Dr. Mandal completed his postdoctoral research at Delaware University as Fulbright Fellow USA and Waterloo University as an International Scientific Exchange Awardee, Canada. Sir was also visiting professor at various universities abroad. Naming few are Harvard University, USA and Kyushu University in Japan. Dr. Mandal received various research fellowships and awards at national and international levels. Naming few are Indo-Canadian Shastri Fellowship, National Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada Award, UGC Young Scientist Award, National Association of Medical Science Award, DRDO Spin-off Technology Award, Agni Award for Excellence in Self-Reliance for developing computerized pilot selection system for Air Force. That is also honored with Technology Leadership Award by Defense Minister of India and the Scientist of the Year Award by the Prime Minister of India in the year 2006. Dr. Mandal specializes in the area of neuropsychology and cognitive science. Sir has in his credits 14 books and over 100 research papers in national and international journals of repute with more than 5,000 citations. So to me personally, Dr. Mandal is a great mentor who has always mentored me in the area of training programs, specifically for police personnel, military forces and paramilitary forces. So I can't forget the contributions of Dr. Mandal in my life in person. So welcome you to Oro University, sir. And now opening the theme of the webinar. As you all know that the theme we have decided as per the consent of Dr. Mandal is Cognitive Neuroscience of Emotional Branding and Subliminal Messaging. So I personally feel that today a lot of companies assume that building a brand is more of an art than a science. However, recent studies suggested that the best companies use a combination of both of these strategies to change or to make the mindset and decisions that appeal to their customers on an emotional, cognitive and logical level. With this thought, sir, I'm handing over the session to you for your expert talk on the theme. It's over to you, sir.
Can I get the screen? Could you see me? I mean, am I audible and visible?
Yes, sir, you're audible and visible.
Okay. Yeah. So, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and it's a pleasure always to talk to people like you. And the invitation actually gave me a challenge because primarily I'm in the field of psychological science and neurosciences, but then getting it into the subject matter of neuromarketing has always been very challenging. The reason being that neuromarketing, what you have asked for, is primarily a translational science and a transdisciplinary science. Why it is translational? Primarily because we try to apply this neuroscientific knowledge to marketing, and it's transdisciplinary primarily because number of sciences actually come together in order to find certain applicable values to the market. But it has still not become a transformative science. The reason being that we are all in the process of developing this science to such a field so that everybody can make use of it in the marketplace. Given this backdrop, my talk will start initially with the issue of cognitive science, because many of us are not really aware of what really cognitive science is all about. This cognitive science as a subject matter has certain issues which we need to understand first. But before I go for that, I would like to tell you that why we are talking about cognitive science in neuromarketing. Because ultimately, when we go for a business transaction, we take a decision. And much of us, or much of our decision making, is not really known why we take a decision, how emotions impact our decisions, how we logically take decisions. Do we remember the brand that we have in hand? Is there a cultural influence in our decision making? And holistically, when we actually go to the market and get a product, we fail to realize whether this judgment has come through a logical sequencing or through intuitive understanding. This is the challenge. Now, this subject matter hasn't come, I guess, more than a decade ago. And then we started realizing that, well, everything that we do has a connectivity with the brain. That is the functional architecture of the brain. So my talk will primarily deal with how our brain actually takes a decision on our behalf, and why understanding brain is important to really get into the consumer experience. The first slide may not be too interesting. That is, what is that cognitive architecture of the brain? First, we must understand, we all understand recognition, but very few of us understand cognition per se. Cognition is nothing but how we register information, how we process information, and how we retrieve information. That's what is all about cognition. But the matter is not so simple, because cognitive science tells that when information comes to our brain, it is represented differentially to different people, and then this information is representational information is transformed through biochemical activity within the brain, and then it is processed, and then it is retrieved. That's why same piece of information, when we get in 3 or 4 persons are getting the same piece of information, get 3-4 different interpretations. So we'll first try to understand the stages, because cognitive science is a science which has got 3 main branches. One is behavioral science, which psychological sciences deal with. One is neuroscience, which neuroscientists deal with. And one is computational science. Because computational science says that if you can tell me how the information is registered, how it is represented, how it is transformed, and how it is retrieved, we'll simulate it digitally. So the digital simulation, the AI, has started taking over the whole process. So right from the understanding of how a piece of information reaches our brain, to digitally transforming it and also creating a neuromorphic system so that the system itself can do the processing for cognition, has become a bigger challenge for engineering sciences, medical sciences, and behavioral sciences. I'll not go into those details of what medical sciences and engineering science are doing in artificial intelligence. Today, I'd like to tell you that how business is getting affected by it. So before we do that, let us try to understand what are the stages, because even computer scientists also fall in the same line to digitally simulate all this piece of information. The first thing we need to understand that we get sensations, how we get sensation, because every sensation is not accepted by us. When a particular energy is accepted, we call it sensation. But the problem is that per second we get around 60,000 sensations. We cannot attend to all. And then we cannot interpret it, because energy is also interpreted in terms of its perception. Because when energy is interpreted, you get a perception. Now the question is, we cannot perceive all 60,000. Ultimately, brain actually gets you around 40 to 50 such sensations and perceptions which you can process. And this is done by attention. Now this is very important for business point of view, because from business point of view, we have got two kinds of attention. One is outside in, other is inside out. The outside in is about the packaging, the brand, the color, the smell, the taste, everything comes from outside in within us. And the other is inside out. That is our belief, our culture, our attitude, our preferences, that is from inside out. So our attention actually works as a regulator, and that regulation becomes very important for business people. Now, whatever we attend, out of 40 items that we attend to per second, we actually store that input as well, which we call memory as well. This memory is also very important from business point of view, because long-term potentiation or long-term memory of a given brand or a product is very important, because if we don't memorize, then every time we have to start the new process. So since we memorize it, we learn it as well. Once we memorize, we do not have to learn it second time. If we don't memorize, then we have to learn it every time the same thing. Therefore, learning helps us. So computer science actually comes up to this level. But then brain takes over, because brain says that anything that you learn has two components. One component is reward, other is punishment. That is, one component is good for you, other component is bad for you. So whenever we go and select a product, our learning determines the utility of those response alternatives. So if I have got 5 products, I will try to assess which will give us more reward. And these response alternatives or the options, we actually attach certain internal value, a mental value. If I've got 5 options, we try to rank it, that which one would be the best for me, which one will give me the best emotional experience, and which one will give me the least emotional experience. When you attach value to it, then you finally take a decision, because the affixed values helps us in decision making. Therefore, you see, from sensation to decision making, there are different stages we pass through, which is called a cognitive architecture of the brain. But this is not true only for business. This is true for almost everything that we process. So the question is that if this cognitive science and then cognitive neuroscience has to apply in the business, we need to understand what are the fields relevant for us. The relevance of this field come in 6 different areas. First of all, as I said, the cognitive science primarily deal and cognitive neuroscience primarily deal with the brain. That is, which part of the brain process information what time. If it is a good processing, if it is a pleasant processing, then which are the areas? If it is unpleasant processing, then which are the areas? So cognitive science started using their knowledge and application to behavior economics. Now, behavior economics is a subject matter which I call a directed basic science, because cognitive science and cognitive neuroscience is a basic science. But this basic science, when we use the applications, when we use the principles of application, then we call it as a directed basic research or a directed basic field. Behavior economics is part of it, which tells how our decisions are impacted. That is, whenever we take a decision, do we take it impulsively or do we take it logically? Can our decisions or decision architecture be influenced? can the public response option to a given product or a given set of product can be influenced. So the picture that you see over is called nudging, where a person carries a basket, food basket, and a mirror is given inside. Why the mirror is given inside? Because if the person is obese, he will start picking up those products which will not give him.
Professor Mandal,
Yes.
I want to interrupt you. I think
Yes.
you're sharing slides,
Yes.
or you're working from slides which are not visible.
So the question is, what I was trying to discuss was how cognitive science and brain can actually helps us understanding the whole issue of marketing and business. So we talked about sensation to decision making in different stages, and we also talked about how cognitive science, how behavioral science, neuroscience, and computational science, they all pitch in to understand how neuromarketing takes place. So from there I had gone to the fields of study where, as I said, that cognitive science and cognitive neuroscience are the two different sciences which are basically a science that tells how brain operates and what are the functional architecture of the brain. But therefrom, one of the ideas of having basic science also to understand the principles of application. So when the principles of application are utilized in a subject matter, it is called directed basic research. So directed basic research is a kind of research where the principles of application are utilized. Behavior economics is one sub-subject. And behavior economics and consumer behavior, they try to understand how the brain principles can be utilized in marketing. So the photograph that I had just shown you is actually a person pushing a food basket, and there is a mirror inside the food basket, and in the mirror the person can see his face and his body, with the idea to influence his decision structure or decision architecture, that whatever he should purchase should be helpful to his body. Therefore, this behavior economics and consumer behavior, which primarily deals with what are the stages through which we actually go and purchase a particular product. From there, actually, the situation has gone to a particular area which is application oriented area or a translational area. That is, utilizing cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience, behavior economics, and consumer behavior, we go to consumer neuroscience and neuromarketing. Now, the photographs that you see is part of the design by the neuromarketers who say that if you allow the customer to touch a product, they start owning it. And this owning process starts with the brain itself. And if you feel good, there is a tendency for you to go and procure it. So consumer neuroscience and neuromarketing basically is an application science, a translational science, which actually helps us understanding that how our decisions are actually translated into marketing behavior. Now, the question is how this process has started. As I said, the whole process hasn't started 10 years, not more than a decade ago. Initially, in the early 2000s, people used to do surveys, questionnaire in order to understand whether their products are liked by others or not. So they used to have surveys and questionnaires, and they used to get some findings. Those findings were not very helpful to them. They found that the correlation between what they are actually implying and what they are actually doing, there is less of correlation. So they started thinking that there should be some more objective measure, because surveys and questionnaires are always subjected to some kind of social desirability factor. To avoid that, they started understanding the behavior in a more objective manner. So the first thing they started doing is to understand the customers or the consumer's pupillary dilation. If I am interested in a given product, my pupil size will dilate. If I'm not interested, it will not dilate. And you can't control it because the brain doesn't allow you to do that because it's a autonomic nervous system. It's a part of your autonomic system where reflex works, and you have got little volition or little ability to control or manipulate it. So people started getting the images of the customer's eyes through videos or through other mechanisms to understand whether a particular product is liked by some people or not liked. When they found some correlation, they moved to further ahead. They had gone to eye tracking. Eye tracking is a kind of instrument where we can tell whether the two sides of your eye, which is called conjugate eye movement, are focusing more to a given product or not. So the consumers or the customers are actually given a spec or a kind of chashma. From there, you can actually record that out of the two products, as you see in this photograph, if there are two products, the eyes are getting concentrated, the eyes are tracking which product more often. If the right hand side or the left hand side product is more often been seen, then we get to understand that the brain is probably preferring the one where the eye is tracking more often. From there, people had gone to further ahead in neuromarketing. They started not only seeing the eye, they started processing the face as well. They found that our face can actually have more than 42,000 different expressions in a given minute of time. And there are micro-momentary expressions in a milliseconds point of view. If you like some product, then within first 200 milliseconds, your face will be different. And then if you try to camouflage it, you would be able to camouflage it only after 500 milliseconds. So if you can capture the customer's facial expressions through any CCTV footage, you would be able to analyze whether a person is really interested in a given product or not. So face processing studies are done. So these are all behavioral sciences or cognitive sciences studies going on. But therefrom, people had gone to electrophysiology, which is called QEEG, that is quantitative EEG. That is when you see a product, what kind of brain wave actually takes place. There are 4 kinds of brain waves generally we see: alpha, beta, theta, and delta. And if I am very happy with the product, then there is a pattern which is called alpha wave. And when you see that product, you can understand whether you are liking the product as well or not. So the whole liking as a phenomenon, whether it is brain driven or not, can be analyzed through QEEG or quantitative EEG. From there, people had gone one step further, which is called MRI or functional MRI. Now, functional MRI, we all know that for medical diagnostics it is being used, but these days it is being used for medical, not only medical, also for business purposes. What the people do, you must have all seen a MRI machine. The person enters into the magnet, and from there he can see certain photographs, certain products, photographs of certain products. The moment you see a product, if you like it or if you don't like it, either of it, the brain will actually behave differently and you can see it. The mechanism is very simple. That is, the moment you see a particular product or a particular stimulus, there is a neural fire. And then moment there is a neural fire, oxygen is depleted. The moment oxygen is depleted, nearby capillaries in the brain open to compensate for that oxygen. And when they rush into that area, there would be 2 kinds of blood in the brain in that particular spot. One is oxygenated blood and other is deoxygenated blood. This oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is captured through magnet to a computer video, and you get to understand which part of the brain is getting metabolized or getting fired up. By having this MRI, you can actually understand whether you are liking this or not, because through localization we understand which part is meant for negative impression and which part is important for positive impression. So even if you don't say anything, because in magnet you cannot speak anything, even if you are not speaking anything, your brain will light up if you like it. Your brain will light up in a different area if you do not like it. So given these kind of instruments and different research methods, people have started working on this area called neuromarketing. Now, what they have found? They found that if you are buying something rationally with logic, that why you should purchase it, then the frontal cortex is getting activated, the front side of the brain. But if you are buying something impulsively, that is, you don't need it, but you feel that you must be, you like a particular brand, therefore you should go for it, then the lighting up of the brain is in a different area, which is called limbic system. I'll not go into the detail of it, but if you see the photograph, the blue area is actually the limbic system, and it tells whether you are getting emotional with the product or not. Then we found that there are certain products which we compulsively buy. That is, the moment I see it, I buy it. It's a compulsion. That is pathological buy. Then there is a different area of the brain gets activated, which is this area called orbitofrontal cortex. So in that way, people have get to understand that if the product memory is stored in a given area, how activation takes with the product experience in the brain, how pattern images are processed in the brain, why packaging has to be done in such a manner that it gives a patterned image, and why people should like it. Many of us actually purchase a product looking at the packet without looking what is there inside. So how brain gets influenced by these things and why our purchase decisions take place is a great input that we get from these kind of studies. But then neuromarketing, with all these ideas of neuroscience, started using it in advertisement, messaging, their eye behavior or gaze behavior, their sensory stimulation, website layout, pricing, packaging, emotional branding, subliminal messaging. There are many areas. Now, from cognitive science, I had gone to cognitive neuroscience, to cognitive consumer neuroscience, to neuromarketing, to different areas of neuromarketing. I'll not be able to take up all these today. I'll take up only two. One is called emotional branding, other is called subliminal messaging. Other areas are equally important, but probably some other day we can talk about it. One such example of this neuromarketing is by this particular experiment what was done in the West on Coca-Cola and Pepsi. In fact, their tastes are same. They are all both from same sugary product, and the formulas are almost same. So what they did, they tried to understand if the people who are consuming it are not aware of the fact whether it is Coca-Cola or Pepsi, and if they are aware of it, whether it is Coca-Cola or Pepsi, whether the brain activation pattern changes or not. And they found that when they don't know whether it is Coca-Cola or Pepsi, the brain gets light up in the same area. But the moment they get to know that it is Coca-Cola and the other is Pepsi, the brain gets lightened up through different areas of the brain. So based on cultural beliefs and geographical area and your ability and visibility of a given product, the brain gets activated. So a lot of such researches are going on, and there are many companies today utilizing this neuromarketing as a principle. Google every day in the face page, you will see Amazon, Coca-Cola, eBay, PayPal, Hyundai, everybody has started using this concept of neuromarketing through research and application. So as I promised that I'll talk about only two topics today. One is emotional branding, other is called subliminal messaging. First is, of course, emotion in consumer behavior. Now, most of us, those who are not in the subject matter, often believe that we cognize first, we see things first, we get a feeling about it, and then we actually go for an action. The neuroscientists tell the other way around. Neuroscientists tell that no, our emotion comes first, then we cognize, and then we take a decision. I'll give you a reason why. Because neuroscientists say that our survival is determined by our emotion first, and then we cognize. That is, fight and flight is something through which we actually evolve. If we don't get to know if there is a tiger, whether we should flee or fight with the tiger, and if we wait for our cognition to happen, we'll be eaten away. Therefore, people say that from the earliest part of our humanity, we have started learning about avoidance and approach, good or bad, fight or flight. So emotion determines in a big way our ultimate action. So despite millions of years of evolution and reasoning power, we still rely very heavily on emotions in decision making. Now, emotion is actually governed by the earliest part of the brain, the very earliest part, which is called globus pallidus. Our frontal lobe, which determines our cognitive power, is increasing over the years. Billions of years we have passed, and it is increasing and it is getting more and more sophisticated. But we found in consumer behavior, ultimately, it is your emotion which gives you a decision. You may actually logically see a product for about 1 hour, but ultimately, if you find that this particular product is being used also by your mother, you go for it, whatever be the logic behind it. I've shown you the photograph of Starbucks because Starbucks is a kind of coffee which is very costly coffee. People can anyway go to a McDonald's shop and get a cup of coffee in 1/3 of a price. But people go for it because Starbucks thought that they can attach the value, the cultural value of Starbucks with the millennials or the people who actually are interested in having it. The Apple phone is also like that. Somebody who owns an Apple phone believes that they are part of the cultural evolution. They are part of that generation. And that belongingness, that emotional attachment with a given product helped Apple actually in a big way. So on Black Fridays, you will find that there is a long queue for people to getting the newest version of the Apple products. So emotions actually do not hinder our decision. It shapes it. So marketers therefore appeal the consumers' needs, emotions, their cultures, their beliefs, and if they hit it, they actually win it. When more scientific studies were done, it has been found using the same fMRI, that is functional magnetic resonance imaging, they try to see that what actually drives our emotion. I mean, they found that the consumers primarily go for their emotional value rather than the kind of information that is attached to the product. The brand attribute, features, facts, we explain it to the customers in a big way. But ultimately, if there is an emotional value attached to it, a personal feeling with it, a personal experience with it, then it actually helps you in a big way. So if you have got Coca-Cola and if you have got certain memories of your anniversary, of your good days when you shared Coca-Cola with your friends, you will go for Coca-Cola, even if people have been saying that that's not good for your health. So the advertising research reveals that it is the intent which matters much more rather than the content of the product. There are three things which ultimately guides our decision making: the context, the content, and the intent. The context, of course, is a varying context. The content, of course, is the brand itself or the product itself, and the intent is our feeling. When these three things come together, you find that there is an overriding feature of intent which actually governs our decision making. Question is, which part of the brain and what kind of neurons actually help us doing this? This researches, I will not go into the great details of this research of mirror neurons. It's a neuron which is actually found in a particular area of the brain. The blue side inside the red neurons that you can see in the photographs, they are called mirror neurons. That is, whatever you do, I have a tendency to repeat that. I have a tendency to mimic that. And this research started sometime 30 years back in Italy. A person called Rizzolatti. He actually was working with monkeys, and he wanted to see when the monkey gets a food, or a peanut, which part of the brain gets activated? So he saw that a specific part of the brain gets activated when the monkey gets a peanut. But one day what happened? The experimenter, that is Mr. Rizzolatti, Dr. Rizzolatti, started picking up some peanuts from the floor without giving it to the monkey. And he found that the same neural activation started happening even if the monkey is not getting it and even if the experimenter is consuming it. From there is an Indian American called Mr. Dr. V.S. Ramachandran, is a famous person in neurosciences. He actually taken it forward to the science called phantom delusion or mirror neuron, where he started understanding why an amputated person who doesn't have got leg gets a pain in that leg. And he understands that even if your leg is not there amputated, for 21 days you get the pain sensation in it. And it is all because of the mirror neuron, because the brain keeps on sending signals even if the leg is not there. From this, the business people get this idea. They get this sensation that if you are offering someone a delicious ice cream like Häagen-Dazs, you also feel like an inner craving starts happening that I should also take it, because the mirror neuron starts activating by seeing those particular photographs. So they started using mirror neurons and neural coupling. Neural coupling means when you actually intensely see someone, you also get the reciprocal activation in the brain. If your real good friend is getting headache, and if he or she is explaining it to you that, yeah, I'm getting a very bad headache, and if he's a good friend, it has been found that even if you do not have headache, the area which causes headache is also getting an activation in the same person if it is tested through electrophysiology or neuroimaging. Therefrom, these sciences have started realizing that if the advertisement is proper, then mirror neuron can be made activated. You get an inner imitation, by it, and this observation of action automatically triggered simulation of that particular action. So mirror neuron actually provides a neural basis for imitation and empathy. All our empathy for a given product or inner call or the inner imitation is because of this mirror neuron. One example, like it is an example of a baby for a sense, and the eye tracking experiment done on this. It has been found that if the baby is face on, that is, if the face is just in front of you, not with the product, you continue to see the baby's face, not the product, because the eye tracking instrument suggests that you have a tendency to see the baby's face more often as compared to the product. But if the baby is seeing the product, then instead of seeing the baby's face, you actually see the product. And that mirror neuron actually activates it, because the baby is seeing it and you will also see it. That's the way we find that the mirror neuron activates. The famous example of Sensodyne, that you get a shivering sensation even without not having such kind of teething problem, is an example of mirror neuron. They actually simulated it from the concept of mirror neuron, and Sensodyne as a toothpaste, they have actually gotten this input from mirror neuron in advertising. So these are the different areas of emotional branding through mirror neuron and neural coupling people have started utilizing in business. From there, I'll talk about something else, the other part of it, the subliminal messaging. Because apart from emotional branding, you have to send the message to the customer or the consumer. The messaging in consumer sciences is done in 4 different ways in any consumer science. One is instant messaging, that is, if you travel by an aircraft, then after your travel gets over, you instantly get a message. How do you feel it? feel about it. That's called instant messaging. But there is something called cryptic messaging. Cryptic messaging is something you don't tell anything about the product. You actually leave a sentence halfway through. That is, if you are interested in a cola product, you don't brand it, you simply show a glass of cola and then write what next. If the message is unfinished, then you have a tendency to fill it up mentally. When you try to fill it up mentally, then in a subsequent ad actually, you come out with that particular brand and try to fill in the gap. Now, when you try to fill in the gap, it gets reinforced, and as a result of which, your perception about that brand actually enhances. That's called cryptic messaging. There is something called persuasive messaging. Persuasive messaging is more often today being done for health ground into these pandemics. We actually persuade people telling why you should wash hands, why you should maintain a 2 gaj ki duri or the distance of 6 feet. Or you can, with a given product, where you can also persuade people why you should take a particular product with rationale and logic. But the problem with the persuasive logic is that the moment you try to convince someone with persuasion, you feel as a customer or a consumer that you are being controlled. Once you have a feeling that you are being controlled, then it is very difficult for someone to actually persuade you. Therefore, the fourth kind of messaging, what I am trying to tell you, is called subliminal messaging. It prevents this from happening. You don't persuade people. You only come out with certain images which does not enter into your conscious level. It remains at your unconscious level. It does not change your perception, but it changes your thought process. That's what is called subliminal messaging. So subliminal messaging is a kind of message which people more often use in order to attract the people. That is, if I am trying to show you something lexically, that is in writing form, but in background I am keeping something else, you would be affected by the background in your thought process, but in your perceptual process, you will see what I have written. So the thought process and the perceptual process, they are disentangled in subliminal messaging. Once this disentanglement is done carefully, it actually works as a magic. Now, subliminal perception and consumer behavior therefore has become very important. If I read it out, the subliminal perception is any information you receive from your senses that you are not consciously aware of happening. People subconsciously respond to flashed images or messages, especially if they are negative. People fail to notice such message, but they changes their thought process. And as I said, that when you see this world, your attention, as I said, inside out and outside in. When it is outside in, that is, you see what is there outside in the world, which is there in the conscious mind. But when it is inside out, your thought process is altered. So when you get certain message, subliminal message, which is actually flashed in a millisecond, or maybe shown in a certain manner, in a subtle manner, that your thought process gets altered. I'll show you one or two such examples, and then we'll properly understand what is the kind of utility of it does have. But basically, this is all about this. Some examples I can show you, like Amazon. Amazon, you see Amazon as a pattern of certain letters which calls Amazon. But subconsciously, you are hit by A and Z. It means Amazon is actually supplying you A to Z, everything. And this message is not directly given. If this message is directly given, the purpose of giving this message is lost. Therefore, brain cognizes complex meaning at a very weak signal. If the signal is weak, we have a misconception that if the signal is strong, then probably the brain will get a better input. But if the signal is weak, actually brain interprets it in its own way. So you get a better stimulation in weak signal as compared to strong signal. So subliminal stimuli worm their way into unconsciousness. They actually enter into your system and start altering your thinking process. Much of our mental processing actually goes on outside this immediate and conscious awareness. As I said, out of 60,000 input that you get per second, very few of them are actually in your perceptual field. Most of them are actually remained in your temporary file, which is actually at your subconscious level. So when you see Baskin-Robbins, this logo, you don't understand that Baskin-Robbins is actually talking about 31 different flavors. This portion is not there. Only this logo is there with Baskin-Robbins, but they actually tell you that there are 31 different flavors. I can give number of examples. Toyota in his logo has got this subliminal message. Hyundai has got this subliminal message. Tour de France also has got this subliminal message. Everywhere, even McDonald's has their subliminal message. If you ask people, they will not be able to tell why they are impressed by this logo. But there are certain subtle ways to actually do that. Brain sciences actually utilize it. They tell that our conscious process is only 20%, even less than that. Our unconscious is much bigger. So if you can hit the subconscious and unconscious, it will remain in your system as a hardwired message. But if you only hit the perceptual level, it will actually hit your only short-term memories, and that will not help you much in a product. But most of the subliminal advertising is banned. I am just giving you, since I have talked about it, because I am nearly finishing. But I must tell you why the subliminal messaging is banned. Because if you see the bottom one, that is, we all know, advertising cigarette product is banned. But the logo for Marlboro is the one which is at the left hand side. This logo is actually embedded in the Ferrari car, and people without using Marlboro actually utilize this logo into the car, so that people become subconsciously get activated. A lot of drinking products are also having a brand which has got their equivalent in alcoholic brand as well. So people have been misusing this subliminal advertising in various ways. Therefore, many countries have actually banned it. But whatever be the reason, my idea was to tell you that how brain actually regulates such kind of behavior. Finally, I must tell you that what are the areas where your students can actually work further, because these are the areas. I won't say that this has been worked very heavily, but last 10 years works are going on in these areas. Now, future research areas, since we have got today a lot of medical devices, technological advances, the tendency to develop or understand the buy buttons in the brain, that is, can we actually localize the areas in the brain which we can call as the buy buttons in the brain. E-payments, for example, is another area where neuromarketing has started working. A lot of people know that e-payments may be risky, may not be secure, but they go for it. Why do they go for it? The idea is that where from this trust comes. Is it simply psychological, or there is a brain part in it? Actually, trust has got a very huge brain component. Like belief is also having a very significant brain component of it. It's called biology of belief. There's a very big theory on biology of belief. It tells how our brain governs our belief system and our neurochemical system within the body. So e-payments is an area. CAPTCHA is an area. Today, anything that you do in any product, you find a CAPTCHA. But you know the cognitive distance between the message that you get and the intended action, the distance and the timing actually tells a lot of things. Because if you are really interested in that product, the CAPTCHA and the pressure on the mouse is different as compared to the one which is not intended. Web searching through eye tracking, that what kind of web layouts we are more interested in. Eye tracking experiments are being done. Scanning bias, which I have personally done with some of my students. I mean, that when you actually have an array of products, why do you see the left-sided products much more as compared to the right-sided products? Because we have a tendency to see everything from left to right, because we read everything from left to right. And since we read everything from left to right, the most important thing that you want your customer to notice must be at the left side, not at the right side. It's a misconception that we see something which is at the central fixation point, that is at the center of our vision. We don't see anything at the center of our vision. We actually either go to the left visual field or to the right visual field. But 78 to 80% of our preference go to the left visual field. In fact, we have done a lot of researches on that area, how scanning bias affect our attentional processing. And finally, haptics, that is when you touch a product, how the ownership starts, which part of the brain gets activated, that also gives a lot of inputs. So these are the areas where no research has been done. As of now, we do not find any research that is being done in these areas. But these are the potential areas, since you have a university system where you can actually do a lot of directed basic research, as well as you are in the business school. Therefore, you can make use of this input for actually making a best application of it in the market. I hope this would be of some use. Finally, we have a book with one of my colleagues, Tanushree Datta. It's Neuromarketing in India. I'm not specialist in that subject matter. As I said, my colleague, Dr. Datta, Professor Datta, she happened to be my student as well. I mean, both of us have tried to come up with some concept of neuromarketing in India, but this is very rudimentary. It's a very rudimentary attempt to understand how in India we have been using the concept of neuromarketing. And since you wanted me to actually talk on neuromarketing, I thought I'll give you a piece of information which is readily available in the market. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for a wonderful, intense presentation on neuroscience. And I'm sure it has brought many insights to the people who are listening to your presentation today. And at the end, specifically in the last slide, you have shown the future areas and scope of research, which I am sure will add value to the existing body of knowledge, specifically in the area of neuromarketing.
Yeah.
So there are a few questions which I would like to take, posed by the students and participants who have joined us for this webinar. We can minimize your presentation, sir, so that you should be visible to them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, fine, great. So, sir, we have first question from Mr. Ravi. He has mentioned that which emotional theory do you feel is justified more in post-pandemic era for marketers, body reaction theory or cognitive arousal theory? So what do you think which will be most impactful or justified?
These are general theories. I mean, if we try to link them with body reaction theory, is called ANS theory, autonomic nervous system based theory. The cognitive arousal theory is actually CNS theory, which is central nervous system based theories. Now the point is that both are equally important. For any kind of sensory stimulation, actually the body reaction theories are better, more important. But the cognitive arousal theories are important when you are actually going for a rational buying. I mean, although these areas are incompatible, I can give you some example. Panic buying is something which is part of what your Honorable Vice Chancellor was referring about pandemic. The panic buying is a tendency which starts with some kind of cognitive arousal. That is, probably I'll not get something which I intended to. So people have a tendency to maximize the fear. When you maximize the fear without understanding the context behind it and rationality behind, you actually go by a cognitive arousal theory. The body reaction theory starts when actually it is related to your personal well-being or personal displeasure. That actually, as the Sensodyne examples I have given you, I mean, that is body reaction theory, which actually explains it much more.
Okay. So next question is coming from our own psychologist, Miss Veena. She's working at Oro University and she's looking after the counseling center and psychology center at Oro University. Her question is like, she would like to know that does individual personality and conditioning plays an important role in buying and what he or she wants to buy? Yeah.
Of course, personality has a big role to play, and not only, our own beliefs actually guide our perception and executable behavior. If our personality, there could be, as I said, if I am having a neurotic personality, I'll go for panic buying. That's one such example. And personalities and buying behavior are actually seen everywhere. People try to match up their personality with their product choices. Lot of such researches were done, but if I try to link it with Big Five personality pattern, then of course it will take a lot of time. I will not invest time right now on this, but it is definitely a good area to do research. One can easily see the relationship between personality and the kind of products we have been buying. A lot of people go for buying with many alternatives. A lot of people don't go for it. So the question is, it all depends on our personality. The selective choice is also part of our personality. How quickly we are influenced with our decision architecture also depends on our personality. If I'm a suggestible personality, then I'll be very easily distracted by what the salesperson has been saying. If I'm not a suggestible personality, then in such case I'll go by what I believe is to be bought. So that's why personality and buying behavior has got a lot of relationship.
Yeah. And so next question is with respect to subliminal marketing techniques. Like when we talk about neuromarketing, it has not been accepted by many worldwide behavioral scientists because they identified that fMRI and EEG may affect the brain later on, and it may actually take a customer to memory loss or maybe short memory disorder kind of disorders. So next question posed by Riya Kulkarni is related to that only. She would like to know, is using subliminal marketing techniques morally correct?
If it is morally incorrect when we try to interject some kind of products which are not to be advertised, and if we try to insert it. Otherwise, subliminal marketing is literally banned in most of the countries. But the question is, there is an ethical part of it as well. The ethical part of it is that if you really want someone to be attracted by a given set of product, you can make use of it. You become immoral the moment you try to make use of it for the benefit of the business, but not to the benefit of the customer. So if you use subliminal messaging for nudging customers, you want to nudge someone for a better decision architecture, then in that case you can always go for subliminal messaging. But if you want to nudge people towards a bad end, definitely it needs to be banned. Pocari, for example, is a product. Pocari is a health drink, basically a health drink. But the Pocari is a kind of alcoholic beer as well. Now Pocari decided that since they cannot advertise it, they can create Pocari as a health drink, and if they advertise it, people get a reinforcement with the original alcoholic brand. So these are certain ways people started misusing this subliminal messaging, which actually affects our perception. Otherwise, if you ask me, subliminal messaging is used every time. When you see something in news, for example, any news, any media you see, none of these clips remain for more than 3 seconds. None of this. If you read at the bottom of some caption, the caption is never kept for more than 2.5 seconds. Why? Because if it is not subliminally presented, then you will never try to see it twice. And since they have to actually show it throughout the day, they utilize this particular technique in order to make sure that your attention is captured. This is subliminal messaging.
Yes. And sir, as you know that Surat is a textile hub, and real estate developers and the textile city is actually suffering from a very bad phase. So do you think that this neuroscience, specifically with respect to subliminal messaging, will help post-COVID-19 to all these developers and textile merchants to cope up with such kind of, consumer perception in future, and they can bring their profitability to a particular level in a short duration of time? So what is your call on this? Yeah.
I think I do not have a very solid answer for that, but subliminal messaging may not be the right way to do this. Emotional branding is much more important here. Emotional branding, because if I had to sell a product which is not being sold currently, then of course through digital platform we can create some form of kinesthetics or haptics. Now haptics is something which can be done in a 3D modeling through online shopping. So if the customers are allowed to customize their own product through some online tools and digitally they are supplied to the customer, the technique could be utilized through 3D visuals or haptics as a technique to create some kind of ownership, so that people wait till the market is out and their products are being sold. So I think it is more about ownership, how the customer or the consumer feels about that product, whether he or she is interested in waiting for that or not. I think emotional branding is a much more important feature here rather than subliminal messaging.
So though there are many questions, but we'll take last two or three questions with your permission, because
sure.
I think they all are keen to utilize your competency and expertise. I think next question is from anonymous attendee. I feel that he or she might be from hospitality industry or restaurant. So the question is aligned to how the neuromarketing can be useful in quick serving restaurant. Can you briefly guide us, please?
I think the mirror neuron. If the food industry or the restaurant, look, there are two kinds. One is a hotel industry, other is the food industry. The hotel industry actually using very heavily Airbnb, for example, very heavily in utilizing neuromarketing technique, very heavily. And they are doing emotional branding. That is, I do not have right now those photographs, but they are using, if you see their ad and other contents, and including their logo is also subliminal messaging. If you see Airbnb logo, if you dissect it, you will find that you are actually entering in a house. So the question is that these techniques are utilized like food industry or in restaurant. The menu cards, a la carte that you all have. Mirror neuron, the taste, like the way McDonald's does it. I mean, it can all be done through some form of brain stimulation. Now, brain doesn't answer everything. For example, brain only answers a portion of it. Now, whatever with the portion, if you are a fence sitter, that is, you are not taking a decision either or this side or that side. If you are a fence sitter, then this tingling of the neuroscientific ways of switching your decision making to the product side is always possible through some kind of research.
Yes, sir. Sir, next question is from one of my colleagues from School of Business, Dr. Meghna Dangi. She wants you to throw some light on, as she is sharing here, the underpinnings of behavioral economics were particularly of great interest. In the context of lockdown, Honorable Prime Minister emphasized on using indigenous products only. So do you think this will create a new branding, advertising strategies by the companies?
Definitely, we need to nudge people on these grounds. We definitely need to nudge people based on our local, it's called local actually. You have to think globally, act locally. Think globally, act locally. So this is called a localization of products. And unless we are self-reliant, you will never have self-control. The self-control comes only when you know that yes, you can go and purchase what you want. The question of having panic buying, what the Honorable Prime Minister was telling yesterday, Who saved you ultimately? The Kirana shop. The shop next door actually helped you because they are local shops. And these local people actually ultimately helped you. So definitely, if we go global, that is, if we think global, we have to think global because we need to also go for our product quality and evaluation. If we do not compete with the product quality and evaluation, if we are only local, then probably it will not help. So that's what the Prime Minister actually referred to. Think global, but act local. Because if you get the same product locally, why not I go for it? So the question is giving the rational branding or rational or logical branding is possible with this logic. And that logic is given through persuasive messaging. So since it's a celebrity endorsement from none other than somebody like Prime Minister, of course people would be impressed by it, and that persuasive messaging will definitely help us.
Yes, sir. I'm taking the last question from the participant. Then I have one question from my end at the end. So Pao Yu Chin would like to know, does emotional branding work more effectively and efficiently with prior interest?
The experience actually matters a lot because all our memories are embedded in our hardware, that is the brain. Once that is hardwired, you are not directly influenced by it. You are indirectly always influenced by it. So your preference and your performance, there may be at times some kind of contrast, but your preference will always unconsciously guide you what kind of product you must look for. You may not get it, but you may not have that response alternative with you. But the question is, preference always helps with your prior experience. If you do not have prior experience, then probably emotional branding doesn't work. Therefore, the hedonic valence of it, once there are response alternatives available with it, the hedonic valence means approach and avoidance. Whether you would like to approach a product, whether you would like to avoid a product. If that is biometrically, behaviorally, biologically determined, we can get a very clear-cut input whether this product is liked by people or not liked by people.
Yes. Sir, from my side, I would like to ask you the last question. Like, when you see in India, when you will see the competency and expertise amongst the professionals, we get science experts separately and marketing experts separately.
Yes.
So we have a good, chunk of neuromarketing experts, specifically who are doing multitasking. So we're always collaborating with neuroscience and marketing separately. So what do you think, what is going to be the future of neuromarketing experts or students who are pursuing BBA or MBA, and if they would like to do neuromarketing as one of their career option? So what is your opinion on this?
As of now, with the current state of knowledge, it glitters more than gold. I mean, there are a lot of glitter here, but less of gold. In order to get gold out of it, we need more solid researches. These are only catchy information. These are only giving us some direction. But look, science actually moves from no knowledge to new knowledge to theory building to principles of application to discovery of solution to translation to production to end user integration. It's a long chain. And today we are actually at the beginner step, that is no knowledge to new knowledge, because this is a transdisciplinary science, a translational science. We have just begun with the basic science like cognitive science or affective neuroscience. We have to go a long way. I'm sure in days to come, you will get customers which are robotized. The robotized customer will only go and get your product. Under the current pandemic situation, a lot of people are even thinking about it. So the question is, ultimately, what would be the fate of it would be, difficult to predict. But at this point of time, as long there is human involvement, brain will be part of it, and brain will continue to actually influence our decision making.
I think, sir, today you have left us with so many introspections with respect to our cognitive psychology and cognitive marketing. And I'm sure we are going to recall all these, and the examples which you have given were quite useful and meaningful. Now, with this thought, I request our Honorable Dean to present his closing remarks for this webinar series. Over to you, Rohit, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir. I attended one of the few sessions from Yoganand Sinhaji, from psychology from University of
Allahabad
Allahabad.
University.
Yes, yes, yes.
He's my
And
friend.
okay. And today I was thinking I am sitting in front of Yoganand Sinhaji, like you. So thank you so much for walking us through to the technical details of the cognitive science, behavioral economics, and consumer behavior. You have very well said that there are certain factors which each person, each company, and each organization has to take into consideration. You mentioned about emotions. You mentioned about how logically we take decisions. Whether do we really remember brand, or it is the culture which is affecting our brand decisions, and sometimes do we take decision logically, or it is through our intuitive understanding. While during your talk you mentioned that how does brain takes decision on our behalf, and while reading consumer experience, if you see, it is always said that the belief, attitude, the personality, and the consumer referral themselves affect a lot in that buying behavior pattern. And I think the consumer experience changes when these attitudes and beliefs play a dominant role. And this is one of the areas where the researches are happening. How does consumer behavior get affected by these psychological traits? Thank you so much, sir. And I just want to, I was thinking while you were talking about that these days, a lot of online marketing is going on. And during your talk, you mentioned that when you allow consumer to touch the product, they start owning it. But now when Amazon and all other websites are selling products and consumer have an ease of getting product at their home, do you really feel that where this factor will definitely lead towards increase or change in the consumer patterns?
Should I tell you?
Yeah, please, sir.
Yeah, the answer is that these days the consumer products are also giving some online tool to rotate it mentally, as well as to have some online tool to actually do it in three-dimensional ways.
Yeah.
So when you actually rotate it mentally with three-dimensional views, you get a tendency that you are probably feeling it and then rotating it mentally. So they are inducing it through some kind of automation and some kind of software tools, and these tools are available today. And they are not only doing that, the customers are also allowed to customize or design their own product.
Yes,
because this is possible through logical processing using software tools. So with this, the haptics and the kinesthetics are also coming in a big way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. And we will definitely remember your two basic themes which you have discussed upon. One was the emotional branding, and the other was subliminal messaging. You have also thrown some light on what are the future areas of research, and I believe the kinesthetics, haptics, and the what you call heuristic will play an important role for teachers like us to enter into new field of research. Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure listening to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Over to you, Monica, ma'am.
Yeah. So, Doctor,
Yes.
Dr. Mittal,
Yes,
so
sir.
in a way, all these products and the owners of these products are hacking humans and pushing that whatever behavior they want us to behave, so they are controlling us.
Yes.
That's what Yuval Noah Harari is talking about, hacking humans.
So these days we have got more hacktivists than activists.
So on behalf of Oro University, sir, on behalf of our founder president Shri H.P. Rama sir, I'm sure he'll be watching us from US at this point in time because he was very well aware of your session. On behalf of our Honorable Vice Chancellor sir and senior officials and my own School of Business team, fellow colleagues, I heartily thank you for your precious time and the knowledge that you have actually gained to us today in the form of intellectual ocean of, I will say that whatever you actually shared with us will be quite useful, and specifically for faculty like me who are teaching marketing, behavioral science and consumer behavior. And I'm sure we are going to incorporate all these new terminologies which you shared with us today to the fullest in our upcoming research papers. And I'm equally thankful to Dr. Tanushree for her presence with us on board today. And I'm surely going to recommend that book, sir, which you have actually shared in the end, and will surely request you for a copy from your end, which we can place in the library. Okay. So once again, sir, I humbly and heartily thank you for your kind presence And all participants also, I'm so thankful that you joined us for this particular webinar series. And please stay tuned to Oro University Facebook page for new upcoming webinar series in future also, because we are bringing many intellectual speakers like Dr. Mandal in the past and also in future for you as a knowledge hub and knowledge bank. So wish you all a very good luck, and stay at home and stay safe, and see you soon in the campus only. Thank you, sir.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.